Welcome to the Church Safety Guys broadcast with hosts James McCarthy, Paul Buckner, and Mike Scully. Together, they make up the Church Safety Guys. Their mission to inspire, influence, and impact church safety teams. Join us for the next hour as we talk about all things church safety and security. Don't forget to like our Facebook page, join one of our church safety and security communities online, and share this broadcast with your church.
Well, good evening and welcome to the Sunday night evening broadcast of the Church Safety Guys. I am James and I am in the studio by myself this evening. Paul had some church activities and Mike has some other stuff going on. So it's just me with you tonight, and we are actually going to key up an interview. Paul and I had a chance a few weeks ago to chat with Massad Ayub and kind of pick his brain a little bit on church safety and security, and see what some of his thoughts on the topic are, and so we'll be playing that for you tonight. But before we get into that, I just want to let you know, as normal, if you're listening on a podcast, thank you. Be sure to click like and subscribe. And then if you're watching this at a later time on YouTube, feel free to click like and subscribe in the lower right-hand corner. And that way you'll get news and different things as we post it through YouTube. So most of the time we upload all of our broadcasts the next day. And so give us 24 hours. But for those of you that listen to different things on the road, look for it the next day. And as always, you can visit our website at churchsafetyguys.com. And we're working on putting together a broadcast list, of different things we've talked about, so you can search through a topic to share with your church if you want to do so. And then real quick, just to throw out there will be more information coming down later on, but we are actually, the Church Safety Guys, our books are actually now on Audible. So you're welcome to take a look at them through there. We're still working on trying to get some of them put on there, but some of the devotionals are on there, and the case for church safety and security. So that's available through that outlet as well. So if you drive a lot, you're welcome to download a copy of the devotion if you're on the road, and that kind of goes through day by day, and you can listen to that devotional as you're driving or as you're on the road. So it's new resources that are available and out there for you to take advantage of. So for tonight, as I said, we're gonna key up the recording, and we will go from there. With Massad Ayub, we got the opportunity to talk to him, and I think he's in the middle of a New England snowstorm at the moment. I actually talked to my parents today, and they're up there in New Hampshire, and they were saying that 17 inches of snow is expected.
Yep.
I'm a Midwesterner, so 17 inches of snow is like the snow apocalypse.
Yeah, I'm not. I moved to Ohio from New Hampshire, so I tried to get away from it, but it's still following me. So, but anyhow, so if you could, sir, with us tonight, I know for Paul and I, we really appreciate you joining us, and you're kind of a legend to us. With your experience in law enforcement, and I know both of us have read some of your books and whatnot. But if you would just kind of go through and tell our folks some of your background and some of the material that you've authored, and we'll kind of go from there.
Sure. I started writing for the gun magazines in 1971, so that's 50 years now. First book was on police impact weapons. That was published in 1978. There's about 20 or so now, different books, counting multiple editions of Gun Digest Book of Concealed Carry, Gun Digest Book of Sig Sauer, that sort of thing. Law enforcement, it's all been part-time, but fully sworn. 8 years as patrolman on the first department, 2 as sergeant, and 6 as lieutenant on the second, and 27 as captain on the third, from which I retired in 2017. I've had the privilege of serving for 19 years as chair of the Firearms and Deadly Force Training Committee for American Society of Law Enforcement Trainers. 14 or 15 years now on the advisory board of the International Law Enforcement Educators and Trainers Association. Been an expert witness in weapons and deadly force and homicide cases since 1979, and I'm still doing that. Basically, I consider myself a full-time trainer. I became a police instructor in 1972, started training private citizens in 1981, and went full-time in training in 1982 to present, which kind of brings us to now.
So you still operate your training company in Florida? Is that correct?
Correct. Masad AU Group LLC. Anyone who's interested, we teach around the country. Go to MASSADAYOOB group.com.
That sounds good. So I guess we'll just dive right into the church aspect of it. I know I had the opportunity to watch some of your interviews with John Correa and at the SHOT Show and that sort of thing. And I know you've probably been brought into the church community with just that discussion, having a safety or security team with church. What are your overall thoughts on that and the necessity of it?
Well, it's essential. Any racial hatred motivated group, any lone wolf with religious fanatic delusions is very likely to target one or another faith, belief system, whatever you choose to call it. We've seen it happen, and we know it's going to happen again. Every time that it happens, like the other massacres in schools elsewhere, the media blitz. My generation used to sing that song, "Want to see my smiling face on the cover of the Rolling Stone." Rolling Stone put the face of Sarnath, the Boston bomber, on the cover of the Rolling Stone. In 1999, at the Columbine Massacre, both Time and Newsweek put those sick little monsters' faces on the covers of their magazines. And every incident like this, CNN talks about almost nothing else for, in a constant repetitive loop for the next several days. And what that mass media exposure has basically done has shown every thwarted loser in America, if you want to become famous, get your hands on a deadly weapon, murder a bunch of helpless innocent people that can't shoot back. We're a nation of 320 plus million. They tell us 1 in every 100 people is a psychopath. Do the math. It's happened before. We know it will happen again. Now, if we wait for law enforcement to get there, it's probably going to take altogether too long. Police response time is going to vary wildly. It depends on the demographics. It depends on the population density. If it's a bedroom community as opposed to a small village, it might take longer during certain hours and vice versa. Weather is a factor, as it is here. I'm talking to you with a nor'easter going on outside my hotel room window. The general average the elementary school. The police had a pretty quick response time, 4 minutes. But by that time, 20 innocent little children were dead. 6 adults had died vainly, helplessly trying to protect them. In the end, when you know this can happen, you must take that into account. And while we call police and paramedics and fire service the first responders, we have to remember those are the first official responders. They're societies, governments' first responders. The true first responder is the individual who is there on the ground when deadly danger breaks out. And this is the whole rationale of the trained church security team. We've seen it work very effectively. You saw really a classic example of comparisons in the last few years in the 2 Texas church shootings. In White Settlement, the pastor actually, it turns out, had a permit to carry and usually did, but could not be present that particular day. There were others who had served as volunteer security, but there was no armed volunteer security during the service. That monster invaded and slaughtered all those innocent people. He was finally killed when a citizen nearby in his home heard the gunfire, grabbed an AR-15 out of the safe, loaded the gun as he was running barefoot to the scene, and finally engaged the man and stopped the killing. Now, you compare that tragedy and the volume of destruction there at the Sutherland Springs Church. You look now at the White Settlement Church that happened late December, I believe, of this past year.
Yes.
The church security was in place. There were multiple trained, competent members of the congregation who had chosen to train regularly, be armed, and that was what limited the death toll. The killer there had a particularly deadly weapon, a 12-gauge shotgun, pockets full of shells, and he had a vast congregation there to pick his victims from. And in less than 5 seconds, it was over. He was able to mortally wound 2 people, one of them a church security guard who wasn't able to deploy his gun in time, unfortunately. And by that point, the head of the church security team, Jack Wilson, killed him instantly from 15 yards away with a headshot to make sure the bullet went over the heads of the congregation and instantly stopped the killing. It's tragic even that 2 good men there had died, but when you compare the statistics on the scales of the balance, you can see there how much quantity of human life was saved by having someone like Jack Wilson there, armed, ready, knowing what to do, and capable of doing it.
Amen. There's an instructor, and I'm sure you can identify with this, and I forget his first name, and shame on me for this, but he says, hopefully, one day you can turn to me in heaven and say, thanks for nothing, because I took all this training from you and I never needed it. None of us really want to ever have to hurt a human being, but we train and we practice that training, and we adapt with the times. I was thinking earlier, by the way, about your career, Mossad. You've gone through every iteration of all these different firearms and holster positions, carry types, ammunitions. You've gone through advents of all these different caliber wars, and stayed relevant and continued to train. And that's a feat. As newcomers on the scene, I was sitting here thinking about that, by the way, so I pay you a compliment there. But going back to the training aspect, we come to people like you to listen and to learn and to grab those gold nuggets and to hear from your experience, because God forbid, it may be us that is put into that Jack Wilson, that Stephen Williford position. And if those 2 men had not trained, and this is exactly what you're talking about, Mossad, if they had not trained, they could very well have been casualties. It likely would have been casualties had they had no training.
They would have been the first of the dominoes to fall. Let me make one point, Paul. You talked about the guy that you trained who said, well, I hope in heaven I'll be able to say thank you for nothing. He will not be able to say that honestly, because what you've given him and what he has given all his members of the congregation is the peace of mind of knowing that if it did happen, that bulwark against the murder of the innocent was, thanks to you and thanks to him and people like him, in place. Think of it as like fire insurance. You know, every time we sign the premium for the fire insurance, you know, we thank God we've never needed it. It's like, oh my God, this is I'll never see this money again. Well, first, to talk to anybody who had a house fire, they'll tell you how damn grateful they were to have the fire insurance.
Yep.
But those of us who haven't, when we're on our deathbeds, are we going to say, my only regret is paying the fire insurance policy and my house didn't burn? Of course not. What we paid for was that peace of mind for ourselves and our family to deal with a predictable contingency. Whereas, as the great police trainer John Hearn put it classically, it's not about the odds, it's about the stakes. It's not because it's necessarily going to happen tomorrow. It's about the absolutely unacceptable level of catastrophe that we'll face if it does happen, and we were not prepared for it. And we had ignored the warning signals. We had ignored history. We had uttered the famous classic last word, it'll never happen.
I love how you said that, because you're not going to regret that on your deathbed. And I have turned to young police officers. Some folks will know that I chaplain law enforcement, and there's a lot of bravado and a lot of silliness that young police officers sometimes believe. And I turned to a young police officer and coined a phrase, because he was saying he knew everything he needed to know. He didn't train anymore. And I said, you're never going to find yourself in a life or death situation and go, you know, guys, I really wish I hadn't trained this much for this. And it's so true. And the other thing that I say to these young guys is, you will not get to press the pause button. You're not going to find yourself in a life or death situation to go, time out. I need 6 weeks on the range. I need hand-to-hand training. I need knife defense training. I need 1,000 rounds of ammo. Because, to your point, all of that comes before the fight. And if you don't do that, as you said, you'll be the first domino to fall. I'm going to start using that. I like that phrase, because without the training, we are going to fail.
Well, and again, it's kind of a mindset thing. In line with, we talked about the peace of mind. Let's talk about deterrent effect. Virtually every study of cop killers, one of the things that the FBI interviewers and others, psychologists and others discovered, was these guys were career criminals, and they told them, look, you learn to assess your opposition. I see a cop who's fat and sloppy, and he's got a ticket book in his gun hand. I figure I can probably take him. I see a cop who's squared away, who's alert, never takes his eyes off me, who's got a gun that he looks like he knows how to use. He keeps himself, in good shape. I'm going to have a whole lot harder time with this guy, and going back to prison sucks, but being dead sucks worse. You're never going to know how many of those young survival-aware cops arrested a compliant suspect who would have attempted to kill anyone less ready. Whether we're talking about the cop facing the potential cop killer, or the people we're talking about tonight, the church security personnel, the shepherds who guard the flock.
Amen.
We're protecting them from predators, right? We all agree on that?
Amen.
Think about this. One definition of predator is expert in prey selection. Just like those cops who studied, who kept their theses cohesive, who every time they made a contact, made it clear they were in charge and did not get attacked. We'll never know how many of them would have if they had presented in a different way.
Yeah.
The folks you're talking to about tonight, and many of us are talking to tonight who are already working church security, we'll never know how many people started to enter that church, maybe struck up a conversation with what they thought was an usher, but was really a security guy, realized, I'm getting the hairy eyeball, this guy's not scared of me, this is not the place, I came to kill, not to die. Excuse me, sir, I think I have the wrong address, and they leave. We'll never know. You can't prove a negative.
Amen.
But history shows us it does happen. 1990s, the monster that shot up the Jewish daycare center in California. When he was captured, he confessed that he was going to hit, first he was going to hit the synagogue. They said, no, wait, I heard they might have armed security. He was going to hit the Jewish Memorial Museum. They said, no, wait, they might have armed security. daycare center, and that's where the evil son of a bitch struck.
Yes.
Predators seek helpless prey. Predators don't prey on other predators unless it's mating season or they're fighting over turf.
Yeah. Yeah, I experienced something, and James, I want to hear you chime in here as well. But I experienced something several years ago in a parking lot, walking with my beautiful wife. We were out of state. It was obvious we were not locals, and a man walked into the parking lot, and I'm head up, alert. I've got my hands, empty, and my wife is walking towards the vehicle with me, and this guy comes into the parking lot, begins to parallel us, and I immediately pinged him as a DLR. I knew he was a doesn't look right. I knew he was sizing me up, and as we got close to our vehicle where I knew we could affect, self evac, I made eye contact with him, and I went, and he literally goes and pointed at me and about faced and walked off because he had decided that I was not a soft target, and he actually the way that he responded to me was like, "Oh, okay, thank you for not baiting me in, or thank you for letting me know before we came to blows here that you were probably going to shoot me." And as you said earlier, Masad, the confidence that comes, the knowing I know where to put the bullet. I'm not going to pick this fight. If you make me, I'll use this, and that kind of confidence telegraphs. And I was able to very easily, quietly tell him I was not his Huckleberry. Or maybe I was his Huckleberry.
Well, that's exactly what we're talking about. If you think about it, it's biology 101. Okay, as we said, predators seek prey. Now, any wildlife biologist will tell you that most predators want the easy kill. They'll get the animal that's alone off the edge of the herd. They'll get the smaller one, the older, slower one, the weaker one, the one that's walking slower because it's injured a hoof or something. Well, how do they know that? Because their observations as wildlife biologists, they've also seen them deselect, the term that we use, seen them deselect the head bull in the herd, deselect the animals that turn to face them and glare at them instead of looking nervous and running away. And you find the very same is true if you talk to criminologists, and particularly criminal psychologists like the late William April, many of whose lectures are available on an archive, thank God, on YouTube. And I'd strongly urge anyone listening to this, do a Google search for the lectures of Dr. William April, A-P-R-I-L-L. They're most educational in and of themselves, and you'll find some of them will work very well for crime prevention and personal protection programs taught through the House of Worship by usually the same personnel who volunteered to be part of church security.
Excellent.
We'll definitely make a note of that. Honestly, Paul, I'm just enjoying listening because I feel like I don't want to. I have like 30 questions piling up in the back of my head, but at the same time, it's just nice to hear the information and the knowledge. I would say probably one of the questions we ask the most is where to start, where to go from. From having nothing. Like if a church has absolutely no security at all, how to get started and what a good course of action is to get from nothing to that Jack Wilson, readiness level. So I guess my question for you, sir, would just be, what are your thoughts on that process, and what do you consider important, and how a church should get started?
Well, sure. First, be looking at members of the congregation who have law enforcement experience or may still be law enforcement officers. A part of your program is going to be interacting with responding officers. I would certainly want, if it was in my community, I would want every one of my officers to be able to touch the mobile computer in the patrol car and call up the pictures of the members of the church security team, or in the educational setting, the school security team, and make sure those pictures are up to date in terms of facial hair and appearance. One huge concern you're going to have if you have armed plainclothes security intervening, taking someone at gunpoint, for example. When the cops get there, we've already had cases like this where the cop yells at the guy with the gun who's pointing at someone who's down because he looks like the perpetrator and the guy on the ground looks like a victim. The good guy hears the shout, "Police!" They turn toward that sound, which is human nature. The gun turns with them. Where the head goes, the body follows, and they get shot. Similarly, I would want the church security personnel to have some sort of identifier. And I don't like to go public because bad guys want you to do with what type of identification process you might have to allow a responding officer to recognize you instead of the bad guy. As far as gathering training, the single best specialist I've seen in this particular field, house of worship security, is also one of our great experts on initial response to mass murders of any kind. His name is Ed Monk. Great experience in military, great experience in law enforcement, and has literally just focused in like a laser on every element of house of worship security. He is located in Whitehall, Arkansas. It's Ed Monk, M-O-N-K. Google will get you to him.
Sure.
He's very, very reasonable for training. Bring him in to fly him in if you have to, and have him do the training. That way you're guaranteed your people have solid base training from the beginning. No one has to reinvent the wheel, so there's a tremendous saving in time and money by all involved.
Amen.
And they're getting solid, proven stuff. This is the kind of guy we bring in to lecture at the law enforcement seminars on how to teach your people to respond to a mass murder in progress.
Do you have,
of course, screening it's got to be volunteer. I don't believe anyone, you hear people say, "Oh my God, I signed up to be a teacher, not a gunman. I signed up to be a deacon, not the right hand holding the sword of the Lord." Okay, fine, dude. We're not making you do that. We only want people who understand, A, this is serious. B, you might actually really have to do it. And here is all that it really entails. And it ain't just about shooting a pistol past some cardboard targets that are supposed to be good guys. You're not supposed to hit the bad guy. There's a whole lot more to it. And part of what you're going to have, of course, is going to be the personal character assessment of every applicant. And be prepared to diplomatically take some people off. There are some people who truly mean well, but simply do not have it in them to use deadly force against another person with a gun. We always hear in the church setting as well as the educational setting, "I would die for the people I love and serve, but I would never kill for them." Okay, let me get this straight. Now, I understand your compassion and your empathy for poor, downtrodden, perhaps mentally ill people who murdered innocent others. At the same time, you're obviously not the one to be protecting the sheep from the wolf, whether the wolf was just hungry or whether the wolf was foaming at the mouth from rabies. Either way, somebody's going to neutralize the wolf, and if you do it, you are not an acceptable applicant for this particular assignment. Another thing you want to look for is character, because one thing a lot of folks in church security don't think about, and that is very often the problem individual is someone who is, or more likely was, a member of the church, perhaps had to be kicked out, perhaps had to be removed from the congregation, perhaps simply made a complete and utter human anus of himself, and blames the church and the parishioners. What you may also see is someone who is the friend, relative, very likely the lover or the spouse of someone who is attending the church. Classically, virtually every pastor I know is to some degree the social worker and the emotional support of parishioners who are going through life crises like a troubled marriage, a divorce, a separation. Now, they of course have the confidentiality of the church, what a Catholic priest would call the sanctity of the confession.
Sure.
At the same time, we saw again the Sutherland Springs case. The killer there, his wife had finally found, she was a churchgoer, as was her family, had, partly through the counseling of the pastor, found the courage to break away from this guy. And therefore, he blames the church. On the day he attacked, his wife might well have been there and certainly would have been a target. One of the wife's relatives, I believe, his mother-in-law, was one of the people killed. Now, that means the church security, when anything like this is going on, when we know either a member of the congregation has had to be shut out, or a member of the congregation is being stalked, everyone on that church security team needs to know the details. They need to have the latest possible picture of this individual. Because very often stalkers will drastically change their appearance. We need to know, is he shaven off the beard he wore for the last 10 years, or is he starting to grow one? Be looking for things of that nature. But anyone on the church security team should be able to recognize that person by facial feature and know what they are capable of and what they've been doing. And this means a bit of a quandary for the pastor, because they now have to, think of it as the religious equivalent of a HIPAA violation. They have to share with others bad things they know about this person. Your church security member, in that case, is going to be much like a young cop. When I was a young cop and they broke me in, and every other young cop that I ever broke in, one of the things we had to tell them is, look, kid, the old saying is true, every town is Peyton Place. Okay, you are going to end up being the keeper of the secrets of the community. You are going to see very ugly things, some of them involving very decent people.
Well said.
You cannot talk about this on your own time. It's not just you don't talk to reporters about it. It's not just we try our cases in the courts, not the press. You can't discuss this at home at family dinner, because if your kid mentions to another kid at school,
absolutely,
the child of someone undergoing this now becomes the target of harassment, it was your fault.
Yeah.
So one of the things you're going to be looking for in your applicants for the church security position is going to be the ability to maintain confidentiality.
Yeah, to your point on that, I know I'm the security director at my church, and several times I have been asked, as other individuals on my team have been asked, to step in for like a counseling session or to stand by because a husband and wife might be going through counseling because they have their marriage has had issues, etc. And we've been asked to actually stand by because of the nature of their relationship. Just in case, just in case something happens or goes sideways. So I definitely understand that.
I wanted to follow that because, Matthew, you had so many great points there. I was taking notes. You mentioned the predator avoiding people who can defend themselves. At the Sutherland Springs shooting, we talked to Stephen Williford and Frank Pomeroy, and those were incredibly painful. You come away from their story a changed person stories. I mean, those interviews are still resonating in the lives of people who heard them. Thank God. And I mean, we had some great conversations with them. And one of the things that came out of that was the fact that the killer at Sutherland Springs had actually gone to two different churches, and they know that Sutherland Springs was his target, but they think he was planning on causing a distraction with a shooting elsewhere. And if I recall the story correctly, that he had pulled up to another church that had like caution vested people in the parking lot. And I guess he was ID'd there later. And then he went to a second church, and I don't know the order on these. And at the other church, saw two uniformed police officers that were actually in attendance. They were going in uniform to attend, get fed, get some worship time in, and then go to work. And he decided not to do that there either. And then he headed to Sutherland Springs to commit his attack. So he went back on his mission, but he was probably going to try to cause as much carnage somewhere else and then go there. That was one thing that was really illuminating from the conversation with those two gentlemen. And then what you said earlier, and both of you said this, James, you as well, we have to be actively in conversation with our pastor, our ministry team, our board, any counselors in the church, any people in the church that are going through relationship problems, because James, you've had this happen. I've been read in on attempted abductions, non-custodial parents, domestic violence, threats of suicide. We had a gentleman that our pastor at the time told him he needed to stop smoking meth and beating his wife, and he told our pastor he was going to kill him. And our pastor's like, look, we're going to law enforcement with this. Don't come to our church to cause a problem. We have some very nice men who will put you in a hole. And the guy backed off. But that's a very real thing. And the most immediate thing I'm dealing with now, and James, I mean, we've talked about these things 100 times. We have a young lady that attends our church, and one of her exes, who she had a child with, has broken into her house. He's actively a danger. He has warrants for his arrest. He's got a history of violence as long as my arm. And we text and social media message with her before she arrives. And she has one of the heavy hitters on our team invariably will go out, walk her and her children in. We have a paid deputy or two on campus. They're aware of the situation. They know what this guy looks like. And I make sure that the deputies always know eye contact. This is this young lady, this is officer so-and-so, deputy so-and-so, because if she walks into the foyer and makes eye contact with that deputy and she's looking at him like, he needs to know, that deputy needs to know something's up, instead of going, why is that a twitch? Why is she doing that? And I'm being silly, but what you said is so powerful, because I've literally talked to churches that they had events happen. They're like, yeah, nobody told the security team that this was going on. That's a problem.
Sounds like you handled that well.
We have been blessed. James and I started doing this, and we are by no means experts, but I would say we are to the point of maybe professionals. We don't have your tenure, sir, but we started doing church safety when you couldn't hardly find a book, and when people went, why would you do church safety? And now people almost apologize to you when you talk about church safety. And this has only been in the last couple of years, James. How many times has somebody gone, I really wish we had a church safety team. Our name the group that's standing in the way won't let us do it. They almost apologize to you on behalf of their church because they don't have one. And unfortunately, what is it they say, Mossad, in the military and in law enforcement? Like the knowledge we have, that road has been paved in the blood of other people. It's something like that. And because good people die, and then we learn as a culture.
Well, Santayana said, those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. That's certainly true in this case. We've seen it in every church, school, and related to mass murder. We know it's there, but it's culturally unacceptable to shoot back these days.
Well, and I want to toss it back to James in a moment. You said that was my third thing. The kind of training that you are talking about, if you read about a martial art in a book, you might think you know something about a martial art until somebody punches you in the face. And so when you go to somebody who knows what they're doing, guys and girls listening at home, like Mossad, when you go to somebody that knows what they're doing and they put you under stress, they teach you academically, then they put the tool in your hand. They want you to go through it, the de-escalation, the role play, the knife attack, whatever that is. If you never have trained under stress, you probably won't perform under stress. And I had two situations 4 days apart, about a year and a half ago, where I looked over my front sight at a man's head. He was trying to get to a vehicle to get a weapon to kill a cop. And I was in as a civilian chaplain. I was in the vicinity of what was going down. I was asked to protect a rookie. I was asked to be there with the blessing of the officer in charge. And this guy was refusing orders. And then his head pops around the side of a truck. He's looking at a cop, and his shoulders start to come up. And it's amazing how fast your weapon can come out of a holster. It's amazing how fast you can acquire a front sight. I had my light here next to my head. It was at night. It was in front of my eye. It wasn't blinding me. And I realized in that moment, and this is something that you understand as a law enforcement officer that some people have never lived, and you've done this a million times to my one, I realized the next move was his. My cards were on the table. Was he going to call? I mean, I'm ready. Was he going to call? And I realized in that moment, and it was a moment God gave me to understand what law enforcement goes through, I realized I'm out of choices. It's his move. And in that same weekend, I do some executive protection for people that come out of sex trafficking and things. And I ended up in a situation where I got between a guy that was trying to kill a young lady, and I had my Glock in my hand, and he realized in that moment that I was going to kill him, and he fled. And to your point, way back in the beginning of the conversation, he looked at the situation. He realized I wasn't going to move. I was between him and her. He was in a truck. He realized that I didn't care. And I was already doing the trigonometry of, okay, this far above the steering wheel, it's going to skip up, fire for effect. And I cocked my head to the side, looking at him like, are you sure? So I say that not for bravado. I called the 3 instructors I spent the most time being trained by. And I called them and I said, thank you. Because what you have taught me saved my life or saved the life of someone I care about. I could not have performed to that level without you. And that's the thing about training, that I beat it to death. I beat that horse to death, and then I keep beating on it. Is you don't, what is it Colonel Grossman says, you don't rise to the occasion, you fall back to the level of your training. And James knows I've come up with sayings, I've come up with slogans. I beat on that, because if you've never trained, odds are you will collapse under that pressure.
Well, the history of it is, we talk about fight or flight response in the human. That goes back to the early 20th century, the work of Dr. Walter Cannon at Harvard Medical School. Now, over the decades, more than a century now, other doctors have quibbled about his research, like, too much emphasis on the blood sugar and so forth. But on our end of it, where the rubber meets the road, the only mistake I can find Dr. Cannon made was when he named it, because it's not a two-way branching, it's 3. It's fight, flight, or freeze. And the ones that freeze, if they survive, and you can debrief them, as I've debriefed some of them, you always get the same answer. It's almost as if they're reading for a script. You ask them, why did you just stand there? And the answer is, I didn't know what to do. And basically what's happening is that computer between their ears went looking for the answer and came up, no file found. If in your training you have touched every person who might be in line with this, certainly you'll be focusing on your security personnel. But if in that instant they can think, I know what to do here, they've got the path to follow. Our job is to lay out that path, to put that option in their computer. Amen. And really, in the end, if you think about it, it's not just the church security. The people in the parish itself, or the congregation itself, should know, if we hear the sound of a gunfire, unless we have a specific assigned security mission, we're going to hit the ground, get down, figure out how we can not get shot and get our loved ones out of an exit here, or here. All of you, before you come in, ask yourselves, if lightning struck the steeple and the roof began to collapse, where would we go to escape? If fire bloomed somewhere near the altar, where would we go to escape? If we hear gunfire, where would we go to escape? But first, get down out of the way of the gunfire and take an instant to assess, and then get going. Now, at the middle level, other church personnel, as opposed to members of the congregation, but not necessarily members of security. If we look at the tragedy that Jack Wilson ended with that single expertly placed shot, the first man to die was not a member of the church security team. As you fellows know, he was an usher. He had approached the troubled, the suspicious individual, and he was the first to be shot when the guy unlimbered his shotgun. Now, if somebody had just taught him, if that happens, grab him in a bear hug. If it's a handgun, get off midline of the bore, grab it with both hands, drive down to the ground, and one of us will take it from there. If it's a long gun, grab it on the two far ends, keep the muzzle away from you and the other innocent people, hold it down with your body weight, and clamp in until we can get there. Nobody would have been killed, except arguably, if he'd kept fighting, perhaps the murderer himself.
Well said.
He didn't know what to do. He literally got his midsides blown out with a blasted 12-gauge buckshot. So it would not hurt, since we all know some of these predators are going to come in because the advice of a clergy person saved someone they wanted from them. They want revenge. We should also be looking at training everyone in the church who wants it, who we can, in simple hand-to-hand self-defense. That young woman that Paul spoke about is only going to be within the mantle of your protection when she's there at the church.
Amen.
It's the old thing: feed a man for a fish, you fed him for a day. Teach a man how to fish, you fed him for life. Be considering, and it'll be good refresher training for your church security crew, doing hand-to-hand self-defense, teaching disarming and handgun retention. I feel anyone who carries a gun and is likely to need to use it needs to know the grappling techniques, that if a much larger, stronger person grabs it and tries to get it away, how you can retain the gun. And you'll find, interestingly, a whole lot of those techniques, most of the techniques that go against the drawn gun, where they've grabbed and we're going to use leverage to take the gun back, will work also if the rapist grabs his female victim and tries to drag her into the bushes, or if someone grabs your little kid and tries to drag him into the bushes, if you've taught your kid to put their whole body weight in it, they can literally tear their hand out of an adult grasp and run. So in essence, it's spreading that oil across the waters. Just as the police can't protect anyone, if you have 100 parishioners in the well of the church and only 3 security guards, something may happen where one of you does not have a clear shot or can't reach them physically in time. But if you grabbed a parishioner and they've been taught what to do if someone grabs you by the neck and tries to take you hostage, be considering, certainly you wouldn't tell every member of the congregation to do that. But ask yourself, if we were to offer a self-defense class, let's say next Saturday afternoon, any of you who'd like to come, maybe as a small nominal fee to cover the costs and all that. And what you'll find, and I'm sure you've already found, Paul, as an instructor, our motto at ASLET, the American Society of Law Enforcement Trainers, was Qui docet dice. He who teaches learns. I think we've all found when we're teaching something to others, every time we teach a technique, it sharpens the imprimatur on our own technique and makes us a better practitioner when we and the new trainee leave the dojo, leave the range, leave whatever the classroom or whatever the training arena was.
Yeah.
So be looking at it holistically. It's not just the security professionals. You're going to want service training going to the ushers, going to the pastors, and you want to be able to share some of it to some degree, even if you have to bring in other folks to volunteer to do it, or the members of the congregation themselves.
Yeah. See, I love what you said a minute ago about the young lady was only going to be at church for a narrow window. And James, you dealt with this. James instructs in firearms up in his state. And one of the very interesting things is, like with this young lady, I immediately began to talk to her and say, do you have a weapon for self-defense? Okay, good. What's your level of training with it? And like many young ladies, she's discovered the hard way she needs it, and now she's behind the 8 ball. So she's scrambling to catch up. And she recently suffered a minor injury doing mixed martial arts. She has picked up a veteran of combat sports as an instructor, and she is learning some very, very dirty fighting skills because she's probably close to 100 pounds smaller than her would-be attacker. And to your point, she's actively learning and actively training. And when she explained to me what her injury was, I laughed and said, well, at least he's taking it easy on you, because it was obvious he wasn't. But we do need everyone trained. I had an experience as a photographer. I stopped on the side of the road in my neighborhood, and there was a herd of cattle. And this goes back to what you said earlier, Masad, about the predator picking easy prey. And there's a herd of cattle, and I looked over, and there was a particularly photogenic calf, and it was right up against the fence. Many small children put themselves in stupid situations. Many small animals, especially calves, put themselves in stupid situations. And it was right where something could have grabbed it, and none of the adults could have stopped it. So this little calf is there, and I start talking to it, snapping pictures from about 15 feet away. Mom comes over and starts pushing the baby away, and she's looking at me, blowing, snorting, stamping, and I'm talking to her. And then she bellows, and here comes the bull. I kid you not, if I could have recorded it, it would have been a textbook for what you're talking about. And Mom's big, and Mom's strong, Mom's healthy, and she calls the bull over, who's two of her. And he walks up to the fence and looks at me and goes, and blows. I can't even mimic it. Really hard out of both nostrils, like beat feet. Get. And I spoke to him and I said, hey, I have to give you guys props. And I drove off. I mean, I was in no danger. I've worked around cattle my entire life, but Mom and Dad were on point. The kid was a goober, and the kid wasn't thinking any more than a human kid does. But Mom and Dad weren't going to let the kid get hurt. And obviously, Mom and Dad had tussled before. They knew how to fight. They knew how to do what they needed to do. And while Dad was up against the fence eyeballing me, Mom shooed the baby away and was putting significant yardage between me as the perceived threat, and the baby. That's exactly what you just talked about with the congregation and people having roles and people understanding protect the children. I would argue there's definitely a place for the armed woman. There's definitely a place for the woman that jumps into the fight. But I guarantee you, my wife's instinct is going to be to get the children away, to get the grandchildren away. And while I engage the threat, and I believe God put that in our hearts to begin with. So James, I have talked an awful lot tonight.
It's all good. I was gonna go back to one of the things that Masad said earlier. You mentioned and commented that law enforcement or officers should know who's on the security team, and that the security team folks should have some sort of identification, so that responding law enforcement officers would know, hey, they're security, they're part of the solution to what's going on and not necessarily the problem. I guess, and we get this question a lot from different churches. At the church that I go to, we actually have a polo shirt that's reflective on both sides, and it actually says across the back safety or security. But what for that type of situation to identify yourself clearly, what would you recommend with that?
Well, the problem with the reflector vest or any obvious identifier is if you got a psycho who's ready to die today, you're going to be the first target.
Sure.
And the protector is the first to fall, and we're back to the dominoes. I'd be suggesting something more subtle, something not widely known. I would not be letting I don't see the parishioners have a need to know. They're going to be discussed. If you tell 100 people tomorrow, 200, then 300 will know. One of those is the sick puppy, and he knows who to go to first.
Yep.
So there are no easy answers. There are no perfect answers. Everyone wants simple answers to complicated questions. This doesn't work in real life. But there are, I would be talking to someone like Ed Monk. There are approaches that can be taken that allow them to be readily identifiable by any regional law enforcement agency. And make sure it's not just your local police department. Mm-hmm. Make sure the county sheriffs know. Make sure the state police barracks in your particular district know. Because whether or not any of them might be in the congregation, any of them might be the first responder. Mm-hmm. Now, you've got to remind your people, too, that certainly your church security people will know one another by sight. There is the possibility that the first responding police officer maybe in plain clothes. This is a tier 1 emergency. I've been running with New York City SCU cops, the Street Crimes Unit. They don't go undercover per se with a fake identity, but they dress like street thugs. They're unshaven. They're blending with the community, if you will. And you know, your church security guy now has shot a man. He's got him down, wounded at gunpoint. He's standing over him with a gun. Here comes a guy that doesn't look like he stepped off the recruiting poster for the state police. He looks like he stepped off Easy Riders, okay, but he may in fact be the first responding officer.
Oh, absolutely.
It's critical that that guy any officer who's working in that area knows that this is highly confidential, but here is what identifies the church security guy.
Yeah. You were talking just a moment ago about like identifying and having these conversations and similar. I have seen situations in law enforcement, and I guarantee you that you have, where, for instance, one night I'm sitting in a patrol car and there's a stop. It's a felony stop. There's 2 occupants. They're about to go to jail. They've got a violent history, and there's no backup, 0 backup. And I'm sitting here with this officer, and I've been a unicorn for a long time, because there are 6 departments that insist that I ride with them armed. Now, come August, I'm going to go through the Night Academy, barring apocalypse, and I'll be actually a commissioned police officer. But I have trained next to these guys for a long time, and I'm a unicorn. That does not happen. There are literally 6 chiefs of police that are like, no, you carry in my office, you carry in my PD, you carry in my car. I want you to carry it because I know you.
Good community.
What's that, sir?
Good community.
Yes, sir. Well, and we're fortunate to be in states. I'm in a state that still honors the Constitution, because I've talked to guys, God bless them, but I've talked to officers from, say, New Jersey, that they about have kittens when they find out that you can actually carry in the state of Missouri. And I'm like, yeah, we can. But where I was going with that is I'm sitting in this car, and all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, in the side view mirror and the corner of my eye, I see a thug. And this guy is, I mean, he's straight up, like you said, off the cover of Easy Rider, and he's charging up the hill past the vehicle, and he's reaching into his side pocket and pulling out a scuzzy looking handgun. And I pivot, and I'm getting ready to body slam this guy. I'm getting ready to come out and hit him. And I realize that guy's DTF. That guy's Drug Task Force. I've met him for 5 seconds. And ironically, I know him really well now. I never came out of the car, but we would have had a really bad blue on blue situation because he was aware of it, and he was trying to get there to back up the officer whose life could have been in danger. And blue on blue is a reality, whether you're law enforcement, military, church safety, and who knows if there's an off-duty police officer in our congregation who's not made him or herself known to us. They just want to melt into the crowd and not be a cop. They don't want to be part of the safety team, and they come charging out and don't know our people, and we don't know them. There might be a lot of big boy words that get used, some confusion, and hopefully no lead flies.
One of the things I'd like to ask real quick, we'll shift gears just a tiny bit with the time that we have left, that I'm just kind of curious your take on it, sir. But a lot of times, one of the questions that we get a lot is, or often is, what type of equipment to use. And honestly, I can tell you that Paul and I are both kind of Glock guys. I say that kind of tongue in cheek because
With over 50 years of experience with religious and nonprofit organizations, Thomas Alexander Insurance & Associates understands that your congregation is different from a traditional business. We're here to fulfill your needs, coming to you while creating a personal plan for your budget and size. From your local community to around the globe, we are advocates for you. Thomas Alexander Insurance and Associates, your partner in service.
Sorry, welcome back. You were listening or watching the Church Safety Guys. I am James, and we've been actually playing an interview this evening with Massad Ayub, and just Paul and I had the opportunity to kind of talk with him, and as we are up for time, we're out of time for this evening. That will be all of it that we'll be playing next week. I hope that we can just touch up the last few minutes and make that available to you guys. But for everything else, thank you for watching tonight. And as always, you're welcome to visit our website at churchsafetyguys.com for new and available resources. And during the week, if you have any questions or have any needs that we can help you with your church, feel free to reach out to us, and we would love to connect with you. So as always, take a minute if you would and go over to our Facebook page and click like and subscribe to our updates, and invite your safety teams into the group. There's always great resources. We always post resources as they become available in the church safety and security group, and then we also post news updates several times during the week as to what's going on with churches around the U.S. So take care. Until next time, have a great week, and God bless. Have a good night.
Thank you for joining the Church Safety Guys broadcast. We hope that you found it informative, and we appreciate your feedback. Looking for ways you can help us reach more churches? Share our broadcast with your teams. Consider becoming a monthly ministry partner. Like and share our page and join the discussion in our Facebook groups. Visit our website at churchsafetyguys.com for other great resources. Remember to keep a servant's heart, a mindset of ministry, and semper disciplina. Always be training. Have a blessed week.